That is, in fact, one of my favorite topics, both that creativity and innovation and Toronto. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. I'm not going to talk much at all about Mozilla. But I want to talk about that in a way you probably haven't spent much time on today. I want to talk about how you create a Toronto that is like Venice in the Renaissance through our kids. But before that, let me kind of engage that broader theme of technology and talent. And I guess, why Mozilla cares about that theme. Well, actually, let's just see if you know anything about Mozilla. So how many people use Firefox or have once used Firefox? And how many people use Chrome now? Be honest? Awesome. That's fine. That's a part of our victory, too. That's a different speech. But really, we exist because we want the web to be an open resource for all of us. And the fact there are now the two biggest browsers after IE are both open source browsers, but more importantly, both driving standards as the basis of industry and creativity on the web. That is victory, and that's what we exist for and stand for. And behind all of that, and some of the stuff we're focused on today, which goes beyond Firefox, we're moving a lot into the mobile web app space, really trying to do what we can to disrupt Android and iOS. And we're also moving a lot into learning and education. And the thing that actually underpins why we cared about the browser in the first place is that the internet and the web in particular began as a place where people came to make stuff and really embrace kind of joyously this spirit of being a maker. And really Mozilla's mission, more deeply and personally than keeping the web open, is helping people move from using the web to making the web. And I think that's key to this idea of Toronto as being like Venice in the Renaissance. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit, because it's becoming a bigger part of our focus. So that's why we care about that topic, is we actually care about what the web is, which is at the center of these ideas around innovation. And I guess, why do I care? I care because I live here. And I've talked a lot about Toronto and innovation over the years. And I came from here. I went to University of Toronto. And I live in High Park. But I also care because I run an organization here that I would rather see grow more of its employees and more of its community in Toronto than some of the other places around the world. And we have offices in all the places that Toronto likes to see as its competitors, in San Francisco and Silicon Valley and London and Berlin and blah, blah, Beijing and Tokyo and all these places. And personally, as an individual and a leader in the organization, I think of Toronto as a place where I want to grow our organization. And unlike a lot of other organizations that are here, we really actually have this as a base of engineering and invention, is not a marketing and sales office for Mozilla. So I care about Toronto because I want to make Mozilla bigger here. But I'm here personally because I do care about what this city is 50 years from now. I care about the long view of Toronto as a place that's going to be remembered as a center of innovation. And I think we can do that. I've thought that for a long time, and I see hints of that, but I actually don't see us going far and fast enough. So I want to dig into that because it is the topic of today. And there's a bunch of ways you could dig into that. One of the most obvious ones is to kind of dig into the question of ambition. And I certainly think we've got far too low a level of ambition as Toronto around technology. We talk about attracting companies like Google. We need to be the place where the next Google comes from, not where we just kind of flip a company and sell it to Silicon Valley. We can be a place where there are companies that change the world. And our ambition is low, but I'm not going to talk about that. We also, another thing you could talk about is diasporas. And actually, I don't know if people have seen The Economist this week. It's my favorite cover of The Economist all year, which is saying a lot because Economist's been pretty entertaining this year. But this is, the cover this year is The Magic of Diasporas, and how the companies and the economies that actually are thriving in this world of debt crisis really are those ones that galvanize the connections between people living outside of their own countries. That those global economies among individuals, amongst immigrants, actually are a really key part of, from kind of remittances through to people working and running companies across national boundaries with the people they grew up with. Huge part of global economic growth. And Toronto could be the place that develops the next Google, because the next Google will be one that taps into those global diasporas. But I don't want to talk about that, although it's an opportunity for us. And then, of course, the other easy thing to talk about if we want to talk about Toronto becoming a real center for technology is to talk about our universities and our colleges. And if people have followed me, you'll know that I actually am a huge believer in Canada's community college system as potentially the base for a revolution in how we teach technology. The people we work with at Seneca College blow away anybody I've worked with in the world, and frankly blow away our universities in terms of the innovation of how they teach computer science. And so we could talk about that. That would be another whole talk. But I'm not going to talk about that. And the reason I'm not going to talk about those things is because what really, to me, increasingly matters about where innovation goes, where the web goes, and where I see hope is kids. And I've got a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old. And they get the internet better than any of you. And they certainly get the internet better than me. They know what it's for, and they know what it's about. But at the same time, what they're growing up on is kind of famous, that this is now the best baby toy on the planet, right? Is that you hand this to a kid and they know how it works. But they actually don't. They don't know how it works in the way that all of us do, because it's kind of shiny and hard to get inside. And that's something that, as much as I'm hopeful about our kids being the thing that will turn Toronto into Renaissance Venice, I'm also a little bit worried, because when we all grew up, I'll just talk about me. When I all grew up, it was kind of with a lot of punk rock and DIY ethic. Maybe that's not everybody in here. But I also grew up with that beautiful sound, almost as beautiful as punk rock. Does everybody remember the sound of the modem connecting? And you remember how often it failed? Like you redial, and you're trying to connect. And then you remember the first time you installed Mosaic or Netscape? Right? These rudimentary web browsers were like a revelation. Look, there's pictures on a computer screen from across the internet. And maybe there's some people younger than me here who don't remember that. But that was like how myself, and frankly everybody who is running an important tech company in the world, first experienced the internet. And it's very different than this, right? It's very different than this. Because what it forced us to do was understand the mechanics of what was going on. It forced us and invited us to go and view source because why isn't that image loading? Or go and view source because I'm making my first website. It's not really that different than writing a document in WordPerfect 5 anyways, and stealing a piece of code from somebody else's web page, so I could make the blink tag work in my web page, and all of those kind of things. We were invited to look under the hood. We were forced to look under the hood because it was hard. And the hardness, we all wanted to connect with each other so much, we put up with, and we learned a lot. And so, when I talk about the sort of, what I increasingly call the web maker spirit, that ethos that the web is a place where I can just express myself and play, and the technology is something that I understand I can manipulate and change, I worry a lot that these are taking that away. And as much as our kids get what the internet is for, they don't get how it works. And that's a problem if what you want to do is create vibrant tech companies, or even people who work in tech companies, because, as I said, all of the people who are leading any of the tech companies you care about grew up with that whining modem sound. And they grew up with Mosaic and Netscape, and they grew up with a web that they could easily and intuitively pull apart, and they did. And then they built stuff. And so, the thing that I'm increasingly interested in is how do we actually re-engage that ethos of web making? And imagine that those skills of pulling things apart and expecting the internet to be something I can open up and play with and manipulate are actually the expectations of our children, and also are the formation of the skill set of our children, both the technical skill set, the ability to understand the mechanics of the internet and make things out of code, and the ethos of the internet, that I can take building blocks from other places and put them together. Those are the things that great tech companies are built from. Those are things we want to bring back to our children. So I was supposed to have some stuff on a screen. See, that's a nice Mozilla web page for you. And so, what I think Toronto needs to do, but I also think the world needs to do, and it's increasingly what I want Mozilla to focus on, is how we do that. How we talk to kids in a way that brings back that webmaker ethos, because they're going to be the ones who lead and work at and run the companies that are going to make this an awesome city. And so I'm just going to show you a video and talk about one tiny thing that we're doing. This is my son, Tristan. And what Tristan is doing is he's using something a little simple thing that we've done to help kids tinker with the web called Hackasaurus. And what Hackasaurus is basically a really easy way, let me get the mouse out of there, for you to see what are the elements of a web page. So without going view source, it's easy to see that's an image tag. And now what he's doing is saying, I don't actually like that web page. No offense to Google, I love you. But he hits the remix button, which is this works in any browser. It works in Chrome, works in IE. And he says, I just want to kind of play with this page. It's a local copy. He's just playing around. So he takes his logo for his gaming website that he runs. He's 12. And he throws it in there. And all of a sudden, he's got his own new version of that page. And so in a very simple step, he's kind of said, oh, the internet's something I can change. And what we've also built into this is the fact that, say he thought that was really cool, because he does, and kids do, he can easily share a Flickr picture or screen capture of that, because he hasn't actually hacked a website. He's just actually done something cool, which is like what kids like to do on the web. Of course, what we do let him do then as a third step is, as in the tradition of view source, which is basically the basis of innovation. We wouldn't have the internet we have if it wasn't for view source and people copying HTML code. What he's able to do is pull that page that he edited into Etherpad and make his own version. And so he's now actually going to take one of his videos from YouTube. He's going to pull the iframe embed code. And he does these, I don't know if people watch video game commentator kids, but it's like the most awesome media phenomena ever if you don't know what's going on with that. It's one of the reasons I say kids know what's going on and we don't. They don't watch television, they watch each other talk over video games about really bizarre stuff. But anyways, he's able to take that and throw that then into his copy of that web page, and now he's got a website. And why we did that, and bye Tristan. Actually, the really cool thing why I made this video, and I have it on my laptop, I just decided the last minute to show it, is that Tristan actually came and did a Hackasaurus workshop, ran a Hackasaurus workshop at TEDx Kids in Brussels earlier this year. So it's an easy thing to do and to teach. So anyways, why I'm telling you about this and why we did this is kids don't know what a URL is. Right? When we go out and we work with kids, they don't understand the basic mechanics of the internet. They understand this, or they understand YouTube. It's not bad, right? I love my tablet and I love YouTube. But it's not the mechanics and the logic of the internet upon which we have built these companies like Google and Facebook, or organizations, nonprofits like Mozilla. It's that basis of a web-making ethos that those things are built on. And kids, especially kind of mainstream kids who don't want to be geeks, they're not exposed to that. So the idea of Hackasaurus is just to find a thing that kids can do that's fun, that exploits what they're already doing, which is sharing nifty stuff for them, stuff they think is nifty, but does it in a way that exposes the mechanics of the web to them. And this is the first step in that. We've refined it actually a lot since this video was made. But we believe, and this is one thing that needs to happen amongst thousands, we believe that what we need to do is reach out to kids to help them discover the basic mechanics of the web, help some of them move on to become coders, because that is the basis of the skills they're going to need to lead these companies, and also the skills that we're going to want them to have to keep the internet an open and free resource, which is the basis of all of the wealth and creativity that we have created through these companies. So another thing I just want to talk to you about is a little bigger than Hackasaurus, although Hackasaurus is picking up all over the place. There was just what we call a hack jam where you come and demo this software for some kids. Somebody just organized one in Nairobi out of the blue last week. So this stuff is picking up. But another thing we're doing just is to kind of talk a little bit about maybe being systematic about reaching out to kids and helping them tap into this webmaker ethos. Is something that we call the Hive Learning Network in New York. And I always love to show New York because Toronto always wants to kick New York's ass. And there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to do that. And this is, I'm going to give you the opportunity to think about that towards the end. So what Hive Learning Network New York City is basically a bunch of people who share that same idea in some way that I just talked about, that it's important to and useful to move kids from using the web to making the web. But what's interesting about this is it's a group of organizations, and actually let me just scroll here, who we kind of have just helped them do some teaching around the web, which includes everybody from the American Museum of Natural History. I don't know if you've ever been there on the west side of Central Park, huge old lady of a museum, beautiful, big building, through to, if you look up there in the top in the Bronx, Dreamyard, a place that teaches arts in the schools in the poorest congressional district in the US, through to folks down in Brooklyn who are, teaching kids explicitly about computers. And there's 40 of these groups we work with. Well, groups, some of them are big institutions. And what all of them have in common, what the Hive is all of them embedding that idea of making things through technology and how they teach whatever they teach. So if I go to the American Museum of Natural History, you're going to find them doing data visualizations, the kids there who are taking science workshops, doing data visualizations from data they've collected out with phones inside of Central Park. If you go to Dreamyard, you're going to see kids making art and poetry projects, but at the same time, picking up a bunch of web development skills. And why that's interesting is all of those institutions, not only do they have awesome educators and awesome physical premises, many of them, and budgets for education, all of them want technology to be more central to how they teach whatever they teach. And instead of going and setting up a bunch of computer labs where you take nice photos of kids sitting in rows, what they've done is said, we're creative participatory educators. Let's actually put this stuff in a way that uses technology how kids use it. And where we've come in is we've backed in the how do you use the technology part. And why I talk to you about that in relationship to the Hive stuff is what happens when we back in the how do you use technology part is that kids are learning how to make things on the web even if that's not what they signed up for. And that's what happened when we heard the modem screeching. Whether we were out there to connect with other people who were knitting or out there to connect with other people who were gaming, the surface of the web as something we could manipulate was put there in front of us as something that was understandable. We saw the mechanics, and if we wanted to, we could manipulate it and change it and grow something from it and gain more skills and even build a company out of it. So what we're doing with Hive is we've got 40 institutions, and we actually have built a fund which is now at almost $2 million a year inside of what's called the New York Community Trust, like the Toronto Community Foundation, which helps them do curriculum development, all of our partner organizations in the Hive. And they are teaching what they teach better. They are getting more and more excited kids, so more kids and more excited kids, and we are teaching those kids to be web makers. And why I talk about that is I think, and when I talk to some people, the people who run New York City Tech Meetup, who are the leaders in that, New York becoming a real center place of the next phase of technology company development, they see that is a key resource. At some, well, maybe not shallow levels, at some very mechanistic levels, like, yeah, if I wanted to move to New York and I'm a geek, there's cool stuff for my kid to do. But more in the sense that there are kids who are turned on to technology, who will want to learn to code, or who will become artists or designers or writers, but understand how code works and thinks, and that is the long-term kind of talent pool that you need to build the kind of companies and the kind of tech economy that we're talking about. And so, you know, I show that stuff to you because I think it's different than the conversations you've probably already had today. Conversations about, you know, universities and how they put out talent, or conversations about how we engage our diaspora communities, or conversations about what kind of companies we want to build. And I think all those things are important, but I actually think this is more important. I think that what we do with kids with Tristan, like Tristan, are more important, because that is going to give us the depth that we need in order to build the kind of companies we're talking about. And, you know, I don't know, maybe there's other stuff I don't know about, but when I talk to my 9-year-old about, you know, they have some computers in the classroom. He goes to Howard Public School in High Park. So, you know, when I talk to him about what kind of internet training they've got, where's the internet in the public school system, which, by the way, I think isn't necessarily the best channel for this. It's why we work with museums and libraries and cultural organizations in the first place. But, you know, I love the school system also, but I ask, you know, what's the internet curriculum that they've had, or what have you learned about the internet this year, Ethan? The only people who come and talk to him in the last 2 years about the internet, maybe 3 years, are the police. Because how we teach the internet to kids is to teach them to fear it. Their experience of the internet is this shiny box, increasingly, and we're not going to build the companies we want to build, and we're not going to have the people with the skills we want if that's how we start out talking to them about the internet. And if we do, it'll be despite us that they get there. And so, you know, I really have committed a big piece of what Mozilla is going to do next year to diving into working with kind of youth, preteens, and teens around a lot of this stuff, and doing a bunch of product development that can drive this stuff. And I guess and so I'm committed to this. I'm committed to the idea that kids are a key part of what we want to do if we want to build this city or the world as something that thrives with the kind of digital creativity we've seen in the last 15 years. And I think if we don't do that, we're just going to go back to the kind of boring, centralized innovation economy that we spent the industrial era with. And maybe that sounds harsh or wrong, or, you know, sky is falling-ish, but I actually think if we don't think about how our kids think about technology, that's what we're going to get. And Toronto will not fare well in that. So, you know, I'm committing a lot to that. There's concrete things we're doing well beyond what I've talked about here. These are sort of some drops in the bucket. But I guess, you know, it's not that hard, and you don't need to join us in order to contribute to this. So what I would say is, I want you to commit, or at least consider, what can you do for the kids around you to help them understand that the web is something they can play with and tinker with and use in the way that many of us in this room have. And if you want to go further than that, I would actually love to have a map that is better than this in Toronto. We've built this in New York in less than 2 years. And it didn't start with a lot of money. It started with maybe, I mean, this was a little bit before we came on the scene. We came in and worked with these groups afterwards. You know, it started with maybe $100,000, $200,000 and a bunch of kind of crazy idealists, and has grown into something that's got $2 million a year, aggregated in a community foundation going into curriculum, and some of the world's biggest cultural industry brands, or kind of cultural institution brands, as well as some of the coolest innovators on the ground in teaching technology. And so I invite you all and encourage you all to do what you can, just to reach out to kids, help them play with the web, whether it's just showing them ViewSource or using something like Hackosaurus. But if there was interest, I'd also be happy to work with you all to make that map better in Toronto.